So you're trying to puppet lock. Hey guys, Otaka here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video of the Chimera variety. So Infinite Forbidden has just had its sneak peek as of recording this video, and it will be released this Friday for worldwide. And with it comes a lot of things that I have been making videos on for the past week or two, and most of it is just primarily Fiendsmith. Which I do, by the way. I want to thank you all for the astounding support on not only the Fiendsmith Chimera video, but just videos in general as of this week. We just hit 1,800 subscribers last night as of recording this video. And that's a perfect segue into say that a lot of you who watch my videos are not subscribed, and if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos, do consider dropping a subscribe on the channel to support me and to continue making these videos, but also leave a like and comment your thoughts on today's video. But in all my Infinite Forbidden testing, I do have to say that Fiendsmith Chimera is by far and none my favorite deck in the next format. Now, if only that Fiendsmith price tag just wasn't so high. Now, in all of my testing for Fiendsmith Chimera, I have stumbled across a few interesting little strategies to increase not only the deck's consistency, but also to, funny enough, puppet lock. It is, of course, of no surprise that the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is still seeing a lot of play in Branded, being their alternate win condition, and it's safe to say that on the ban list coming in late August, that Sanctifier might not be seeing very many days. So for all those Branded players that are going to be sad because they lose their Sanctifier Dragon, myself included, I have found a brand new way to puppet lock everyone. It's just in Chimera Fiendsmith instead of Branded. So the question here is how do I do it? How do we do it? Well, a lot of it does fall upon the Fiendsmith engine, and in my time of testing with the Fiendsmith Chimera, I have learned that there is a lot of ways to get the Fiendsmith engine without opening it. So here you see a hand that does not have a single Fiendsmith card. It does not have Engraver or Tractus or even Fabled Luri in hand. So this is all going to happen in the main phase. I just forget to change the phases on DB half the time, but Nightmare Apprentice is going to be our lead by sending the Edge-Imp Chain to the graveyard to summon itself. We're going to go chain 1 Nightmare Apprentice, chain 2 Edge-Imp Chain to, of course, chain block to add the Fright for Patchwork and the Codal. We're going to then use Cornfield Codal's effect to send itself to the graveyard to be able to add a card that mentions Chimera Fusion, or a monster that mentions Chimera Fusion, so we're going to add the Big Winged Baphomet. The reason I'm adding Baphomet here instead of the Gazelle is because we already opened Mirror Sword Knight, so we are going to actually fire off the Chimera Fusion to fuse the Baphomet and the Sword Knight to make the Fusion Baphomet, and then we're going to go chain 1 Baphomet Engrave to summon the Mirror Sword Knight from the graveyard, and then we're going to go chain 2 Fusion Baphomet to dump a Beast Fiend or Illusion from the deck to the graveyard. Our target of choosing is going to be the oh-so-wonderful Evil Hero Sinister Necrom, which I will explain here in a minute what this does, but we're going to, on chain 1, of course, summon the Mirror Sword Knight from the Baphomet effect. So Evil Hero Sinister Necrom is a level 5 Fiend, meaning it's searchable via Gazelle's effect when it's summoned, but also, if this card is in the graveyard, you can banish it from the graveyard, special summon 1 Evil Hero monster from your hand or deck, except Evil Hero Sinister Necrom. This is a very key factor to getting to our Fiendsmith engine, but before we use his effect, we are going to use the graveyard effect of Chimera Fusion to add it back to our hand from the graveyard, and then we're going to use his effect, Banish for cost, to summon out the Evil Hero Adusted Gold. Now, Adusted Gold's on-field effect doesn't really matter here. What is important is he is a level 4 light fiend monster. Now you see where this is going. We're going to link him off to make the Fiendsmith Requiem. And of course, from here, we are just going to go full Fiendsmith combo. We're going to be summoning out the Engraver from Requiem's effect. We are then going to link away the Engraver and the Nightmare Apprentice to make the Fiendsmith Sequence, which it's called in the TCG. I think Sequentia is a lot cooler of a name, but whatever. We like to dumb things down a little bit. We're then going to use Sequentia's effect to fuse the Requiem and the Adusted Gold to make the Fiendsmith Lacrimosa. We're then going to use Lacrimosa's effect to revive the Engraver that is back in grave, and we're going to Xyz Summon to, of course, make the oh-so-wonderful Beatrice. Now, I do want to say that this whole Puppet Lock combo does not exist if Beatrice ends up getting hit on the next ban list. But all that being said, because the Puppet Lock is only doable via the Fiendsmith engine, this technically means that any deck can Puppet Lock at this point. I just think it's a lot more consistent in the Chimera deck, simply because we can get to the Fiendsmith engine without making a Link 2 to then go into a Link 1 to then go into a Link 2 again, and etc, etc. We're then going to activate our Fright for Patchwork, of course, to add Poly and the Edge-Imp Chain to our hand, because at this point, if our opponent had Droll, they would have Drolled us ages ago. So we're just gonna try and get some more card advantage, and then we are going to use the Mirror Sword Knight, send himself to the graveyard for cost to summon out the Gazelle. Reason we're doing Gazelle here, we don't want to lock ourselves in case we want to continue making link plays, and Baphomet does lock us into fusions when we use his on-field effect. We're going to use Gazelle's effect at another Chimera fusion because we do want to use one of the Chimera fusions, but we do want to have one for our opponent's turn. We are then going to activate the polymerization. We are actually going to, instead of using the Edge of Chain in hand, we are going to fuse the Gazelle and the sequence on the field to make our oh so wonderful Chimera King of the Phantom Beasts, because sequence is a fiend, so this works. On a brand new chain, we are going to go chain 1 Gazelle and chain 2 Chimera. Chimera to chain block, but also on end phase to rip a card out of our opponent's hand. Gazelle is going to add the Diabell's original Sin Keeper to our hand, and then we are going to pretty much instantly fire off the Beatrice, detach the Lacrimosa to send the card that makes almost all of this possible, Angel of Blue Tears. Now, the first effect of this card is irrelevant, and I'm sure many of you have heard about this when we were going into the Fiendsmith cards, but if you haven't, the graveyard effect of this is if effect damage is inflicted, you can banish this card from your graveyard, set one normal trap directly from the deck or hand, and if the trap was set from your hand, it can be activated this turn. The reason this is important is because the card we just attached off Beatrice to send the Angel Blue Tears is, of course, going to burn our opponent. So on a brand new chain, we're going to go Lacrimosa's effect to burn our opponent for 1200 by shuffling a Light Fiend back into the deck or the extra deck, and just so happens the Light Fiend in our graveyard is the sequence. So, of course, at this point, we have burned our opponent for 1200, so on a brand new chain, we're going to go Angel of Blue Tears, banish it for cost, and set ourselves a card that branded players have been experimenting with out of fear for the Sanctifier getting banned, the Give and Take. Now, again, if you don't know what this card is, it's a trap card, normal trap card. Special summon one monster from your graveyard to your opponent's side of the field in defense position and increase the level of one monster you control by the level of the special summon monster until the end phase. Yeah, cool. We're still puppet locking. And then from here, we're just going to kind of try and set up a more formidable board in case they try to find a way out of this. We are going to go Chimera Fusion to fuse away the Chimera King of Phantom Beasts because we do want him in the graveyard for our opponent's turn. And we're going to fuse away the Diabell's, the original Sin Keeper, as another material to make Magnum the Reliever, which, funny enough, is also a Light Fiend. I mentioned this in the last Chimera video, that you could technically use him to get to Requiem if you absolutely needed to. I don't think it's necessary, but he can also be shuffled back via the effects of like Lacrimosa or Sequence or just Engraver, so that way you can keep recycling Magnum. We are then actually going to use Magnum's first effect to be able to draw a card, so that way we just have more card advantage, but also we can put the Chimera Fusion back into the deck. We already have Poly Engrave. We don't want to put Poly back because if we summon Guardian Chimera on our opponent's turn, we don't want him to be able to be targeted, so we're going to keep the Poly in the graveyard, and you know, we don't technically want Chimera Fusion engrave if we can help it, but we are going to then draw our card, which in this example could be literally anything. From here, we are pretty much just done with our turn. We're going to just set the Imperm that we drew off of Magnum. We're going to set the Chimera Fusion, and then we are, of course, going to move to the end phase. In end phase, we rip a card out of our opponent's hand thanks to the Chimera, and then we are going to move to the draw phase. In our opponent's draw phase, the moment they draw a card, we are going to fire off the Beatrice, detaching the Engraver to dump our favorite gimmick puppet, Nightmare. And then we are going to, once again, fire off the Give and Take, summon the puppet to our opponent's field, and then we're going to increase the level of one of them by 8. It's pretty much irrelevant at this point. But at this point, we have puppet locked our opponent in Chimera Fiendsmith. Like I said, this is all pretty unlikely to happen if Beatrice gets banned on the next ban list, which I don't foresee it not getting hit on the next ban list, but we will just have to see. The perks here is that Angel of Blue Tears is a rare from Maze of Memories, I believe, and it's like a 30-cent card. Now, the problem here is that Give and Take, thanks to branded players trying to lab it for the day that Sanctifier gets banned, it's like a $10 card with only one printing. I have picked up like 5 copies ready for stonks. But yeah, this card's going to be the pricey bit on top of the Fiendsmith engine. But let's go ahead and jump on over to the deck list just to really show you guys what I've been testing with since the last Fiendsmith Chimera build, because I have kind of fine-tuned it a little bit more. All right, so the build we're looking at is pretty much what I will be running for the info format as long as nothing gets hit, specifically Beatrice. But this is pretty much as fine-tuned as I can get it at the moment. There is one card missing out of the extra deck. That is going to be Aerial Eater. I will put the image here on screen now. This card is just really powerful. It makes very good synchronicity with the Fiendsmith engine, but also we run a lot of multiple Fiends with the same attribute, so it's very just easy to make it, and it's just really fucking powerful. So that will be the last slot in my extra deck. But starting with the main deck, of course, we do run 3 Ash Blossom of Joyous Spring. We'll run 3 Mourner. We run 3 Imperm. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and then also 2 Droll and Lockbird because we do run Crossout in the side. And Crossout is... Droll kills our deck. It kills both Fiendsmith and Chimera. So having Droll is necessary. But also Fiendsmith... plays into Droll heavily, so if your opponent is playing Fiendsmith something else, and they start with Fiendsmith, they are heavily playing into Droll and Lockbird, which hopefully Droll and Lockbird shuts down the rest of their deck, or at the very least slows it down. We are running normal ratios of 2 Big Wing Berfomet, 3 Codal, 1 Diabells, 2 Gazelle. Gazelle is not as important in this version of the build, because again, we are only running 1 Chimera, King of the Phantom Beasts, and then 3 of the Mirror Sword Knight. We are running Edge Imp Chain package, so we have 2 Edge Imp Chain, 3 Patchwork, 2 Poly, and then we are running 1 Evil Hero Dusted Gold and 1 Evil Hero Sinister Necrom. We don't actually really want to see these cards in the opening hand. Sinister Necrom in the opening hand is not as bad because it is handy to just be able to kind of search this out if you don't want to dump it off of the Fusion Berfomet's effect. Gazelle being able to search this and then just fuse it away, still get it into the graveyard is still very handy, but you don't really ever want to see a Dusted Gold in your opening hand because what this does is pretty much just forces you to normal summon it to get to your Fiendsmith engine. We then, of course, are running the 1 Fabled Luri for Fiendsmith engine, of course, the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare to be able to dump it, the Master Tau the Chanter to be able to summon our illusions back, and then I am only running 2 Nightmare Apprentice. I didn't want to clog up the deck too much. We are at a 48 count already. You could technically just get the extra one in there, but she is not as important in this build, even though she is a level 6 to help make rank 6s. The only rank 6s we are making is Beatrice and the Caesar, and Caesar requires Fiends, so we're super unlikely to actually use this for rank material. We are then, of course, running the 3 Fiendsmith Engraver because duh, and we are running 3 Chimera Fusion because, again, duh. Now, the one big difference here is in my last Fiendsmith Chimera video, I was running 3 Tractus. Came to find out that's actually just super unnecessary. You don't really need it. Yes, it still kind of gets you to the Fiendsmith engine, but thanks to a Dusted Gold, we don't need to get to it as often if we don't open it because we still have ways to get to it. So 3 Tractus is super unnecessary, and thanks to the fact that it's a secret rare, you don't really want to be paying for 3 copies of this card. So 1 Tractus is fine. 1 Foolish Burial because we can just Foolish the Sinister Necrom to still get to the Dusted Gold, to still be able to get to the Fiendsmith engine. And then just Foolish Burial is just really good as well for getting pieces for the Chimera build that you need in the graveyard still. You could still dump like a Light Fiend in the graveyard, so that way you have the bodies for the Beatrice Lacrimosa combo. And then we're running 2 talents for those times to punish that we get hit with hand traps, most likely multiple hand traps. And then we have the 1 Give and Take. As for the side, again, this is still pretty based off of what kind of event you're going to, but still running the Archfiend Hyrus and the Simmel Archfiends. This is primarily because Simmel Archfiends can be searched if we dump the Hyrus. Simmel then just kind of shuts off most of Snake Eyes combos. It shuts off the Tempai Dragons, which is a very formidable deck going into the next format. And then 3 Crossout, which I think is kind of a must in Chimera. I don't main deck it. I don't think you need to main deck it because there are just matchups where they are not going to kill you. And then there are just, of course, hands that they don't open the Droll and Lockbird. But Crossout Designator post side, I think, is mandatory. From there, the rest of it is pretty based off of what kind of event you're going to. I've just been practicing with like Bestials and shit because Light Fiends are running around in the format, of course. And then, you know, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, still really good because there's a lot of continuous spells and traps running around. Nib is Nib. And then Cosmic Cyclone to snipe shit out the back row. I am running 2 of the Fusion Berfomet. This is still pretty standard. 1 of the OTK Illusion Beast, and then 1 of the King of Phantom Beasts. There's not really any need for more than 1 of the Phantom Beast, personally. There are builds that I do run around with that have 2 of him, because just having the second one in circulation can be helpful, but it's not a must, because Basically, you just banish this from the graveyard, summon out Diabells, and then you have the Baphomet engraved as well to banish the Baphomet to summon this back from the banish pile. And then later in the duel, you kind of have that grind game where if this hits the graveyard again, you can summon something else from the graveyard. But at that point, it's still pretty permanent. But that's why we run 2 Baphomet, because if there's a second Baphomet in the grave, we can get this in circulation again. One of the Lacrimosa, I was running 2 of this in the last build. The second one was just completely unnecessary, and we're not running the big Omni Negate one. The Omni Negate one's good, but it doesn't achieve what we're trying to go for in Chimera, and it's just kind of expensive to make. I think that card specifically is a lot better if Beatrice gets banned and if you're playing Snake Eyes specifically. I've seen a lot of good combos with Desiree where he can basically negate your Promethean Princess so you're not fire locked when you have her on the field, so she's kind of just chilling as a Link 3 until you're ready to use her. But I don't think Desiree's as good in Fiendsmith Chimera personally, but I think a lot of that is also just like a personal preference. If you want to run Desiree, go for it. 1 Guardian Chimera, I don't think we need to have 2 in this deck. I think in other like Chimera builds, Guardian Chimera at 2 is good, but if we're summoning Guardian Chimera at this point, we should be on the winning curve in the game. We're just trying to basically stomp our opponent further into the dirt. So I don't think Guardian Chimera at 2 is absolutely necessary. Unless we're trying to go second, then a second Guardian Chimera can be useful. However, we do have other ways to play around going second. 1 Magnum the Reliever, you don't need more than 1 of this. Light Fiend monster, draw power, popping power, helps you get Diabells into the grave if she's in your opening hand. 1 Chaos Angel because, again, we have multiple ways to make this. We do technically have the Adusted Gold, which is a level 4, so you could make just a pure light Chaos Angel. But you could also, again, just with the Nightmare Apprentice or the Mirror Sword Knight, you can make the Light and Dark Chaos Angel. With Nightmare Apprentice and Adusted Gold, you can, again, make the Dark and the Light Chaos Angel. There's a lot of routes to get to Chaos Angel now in this build. So don't limit yourself by any means. 1 Beatrice, because that's all we can run, but also because Fiendsmith, and this card's going to get banned, most likely. 1 Caesar, we don't summon this as often. The only time we really summon this is if, like, we just go into this with the Fiendsmith engine, and then we use our rank 6s from the Chimera build to go into Beatrice instead, which is a possibility, but you do want to get that effect off of the Lacrimosa to set the give and take, so that way, you can, of course, get the puppet lock going. Beatrice, of course, being able to do that because she can detach at any point, whereas Highway King Caesar can only detach if he's negating a special summon. Appaloosa, because, again, Fiendsmith can kind of get to this really easy. Getting a 3-stack or a 4-stack Appaloosa is really possible for the Fiendsmith engine. Then the Fiendsmith Requiem because Fiendsmith Sequence because Sequence is really good because it just has to summon a Fusion Fiend, which the Aerial Eater is a Fusion Fiend. The Baphomet is a Fusion Fiend, so we don't actually have to summon like Lacrimosa specifically. We cannot summon Magnum though because we can only use monsters in the graveyard with Sequence's effect, so the Magnum requires a monster in our hand and 1 on the field, so there is that issue, but at this point, like, we have multiple options to go into more than just Lacrimosa, so Sequence is still useful. Being able to go into like Baphomet or the Aerial Eater does help us get some of the monsters in our graveyard that maybe we want back in the deck. We can maybe get like Edgemp Chain back into the deck and shuffle the Sinister Necron back in the deck, so that way we get our Dark Fiends back in there. And then also if the Edgemp Chain is back in the deck, that possibly means that the 3rd Fright for Patchwork is actually live because Magnum can also put the Poly back in the deck. So there are, of course, some like recursion combos to be had here. And then we do run the SP Little Knight because, again, duh. But that is all I have for you guys today. So, of course, comment down below what your thoughts are on the Puppet Lock in the Chimera build. It's pretty consistent. I'd say about 8 hands out of 10 can pretty much pull this off every time as long as they're not interrupted, of course. But also don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already so you can continue to support the channel so I can continue to make videos like this one. But with that, I will see you all in the next video. See ya!